started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to GrowSmart Maine's Growing Smart in Mid-Sized Cities webinar. My name is Maggie Fleming. I'm the GrowSmart Maine Board Secretary and Events Committee Chair. Today's panel will be moderated by Markos Miller, South Portland Educator and my fellow Events Committee member, as well as Nancy Smith, our GrowSmart Maine CEO. And we have four distinguished panelists today: Kristina Cannon, who's Executive Director at Main Street Skowhegan; Michael Foley, the Mayor of Westbrook; Jason Levesque, Mayor of Auburn; and Galen Weibley, Director of Economic and Community Development for the City of Presque Isle. I'd like to take a moment to honor the people of the Wabanaki Confederacy, the Penobscot, Passamaquoddy, the Maliseet, and the Micmac people. These people are the traditional inhabitants of the lands of the state of Maine, and no matter where you are watching from today in Maine, you're on traditional Wabanaki territory. In thinking about your personal relationship with Maine and future opportunities for the state during today's webinar, please consider the relationship that members of the Wabanaki Confederacy have shared and continue to share with this place as well. So why are we here today? The purpose of this webinar is to discuss and share smart growth strategies and lessons learned and insights that citizen planners, developers, and municipal officials can put to use in their own towns and municipalities. Today's program will be 90 minutes. During the first portion of the webinar, each panel member will be asked to discuss one specific initiative in their communities and the tangible actions taken that may be helpful to others. The second portion of the webinar will be a peer-to-peer discussion amongst the panelists, and we will leave time for Q&A at the end. We encourage you to turn your videos on, but please remember to keep yourself muted during the panel. And if you would like to ask a question during the Q&A, please raise your hand or type questions into the chat box. And we are going to be recording today's webinar, and it will be posted to our YouTube and social media channels afterwards. And now I'm going to turn it over to Markos to start the panel.
Thank you very much, Maggie. Welcome, everyone. And I want to thank our panelists for joining us too. Kristina Cannon from Skowhegan, Mayor Michael Foley from Westbrook, Mayor Jason Levesque from Auburn, and Galen Weibley from Presque Isle. We've asked each of you to join us today because of the innovative work that you are doing to invigorate your downtowns and your urban centers. And we've asked each of you to speak about a particular forward-thinking strategy that you are using to facilitate development in your town centers. I'm going to start, we're going to go through the panelists in alphabetical order, and I'll start with Kristina Cannon. Kristina, I wondered if you could tell us just a little bit in a few minutes about the focus in Skowhegan on outdoor recreation, particularly the Skowhegan River Park.
Sure. And just to confirm, this is not my full presentation. I'm just going to give a quick little roll through. Okay. So my name is Kristina Cannon. I'm the Executive Director for Main Street Skowhegan, and we're a nonprofit working to revitalize the town of Skowhegan. We work directly with the town, the municipality, several economic development corporations and organizations in the area, and we do quite a bit of collaborative work generally. And in 2015, when I started in this role, we had a grant from the Maine Community Foundation to actually conduct a strategic plan for our organization. But I said, let's actually conduct the plan and pull together strategies for revitalizing Skowhegan. So we put together a community-wide strategic planning committee, if you will, and then we talked to more than 500 members of and residents of Skowhegan to learn what they thought the future of Skowhegan should look like. And so our work has been entirely directed by that effort. In 2016, the town of Skowhegan actually voted in at town meeting the Skowhegan Strategic Plan for Community Transformation. It's got a number of strategies within it that define our work, and it's used by other organizations in Skowhegan as well. And the one that we're going to talk about today in particular is outdoor recreation and utilizing our natural assets as a tool for community transformation and economic development.
Great, thank you so much. So it sounds like the focus on outdoor recreation and particularly the river park really grows out of some outreach and public engagement. Could you tell us a little more about that process?
Sure. So we, like I said, we pulled together a committee. We had people from not only our board, but also some local businesses, local organizations. We had residents, and then we spent some time reviewing previous plans, and then really dug in on public engagement and did surveys. We met with people individually. We had small group meetings, and then we had a couple of large public engagement sessions where people gave us their opinions about what the future of Skowhegan should look like. And so that was a really important piece for us, because we obviously wanted to lead strategic efforts for revitalization based on what the community wanted. And one of the top things, if not the top thing that people mentioned, was that we've turned our backs to the river for too long, that we need to focus on our river as a tool for revitalization. And there was already a plan in place to actually build a river park in our downtown river gorge. And so that's where we kind of dug in and moved forward.
What were some surprises going through that process, Kristina?
Through the strategic planning process?
Yeah.
Gosh, it was so long ago. I guess I'll admit, I did not know a lot about the River Park plan when I took over in this role, and I was surprised to hear so many people were excited about it. And I was also surprised to hear so many people were thrilled about our local food and agricultural movement, which is another key piece of Skowhegan's revitalization efforts. So really, if you look at what we're doing in Skowhegan, we've got basically two brand pillars, if you will, and outdoor recreation and local food are two areas of focus. And so I was just surprised on how many people were behind both of those strategies and excited about the future as it relates to those initiatives.
Great. What are some other components of the outdoor recreation piece besides the river park?
So the river park is a grand vision, and that includes a whitewater park right in our downtown. Includes river access as well, and that includes ADA access on one side of the river. There's also the element of riverfront development, and so we actually are working on a plan to redevelop the riverfront and connect it to our commercial district. So that's something I'll be sharing a little bit about in my presentation. And we're also working with the Outdoor Sport Institute to develop a trail master plan as well. So trails, river access, river development, there's all sorts of stuff that's going on from an infrastructure and programming perspective.
Okay, and it sounds like you have some specific things you want to share. If you want to go ahead with your presentation, please. If you have some
Sure.
specifics.
Okay, I will launch into that then. I'm going to share my screen, everyone. Sorry, for some reason it's not allowing me to share my screen.
We'll see if Tammy can fix that behind the scenes. So we are showing that all participants can share the screen. So I don't know what the problem is.
And maybe there's something going on my end. I am also on a new computer. So this could be something on my end.
You're welcome to just talk to some of those points too, if that's easier at this point.
Would really like to share my screen. Hold on a minute. Feel free feel free to jump to someone else if you'd like, and you can come back to me if you'd like.
Yeah, we'll give you some time to get that sorted out, and I'll turn to Mayor Michael Foley from Westbrook. Welcome, Mayor Foley.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here to talk about some of the great work we've done in Westbrook. For those who don't know me, I'm Michael Foley, Mayor of the City of Westbrook. I've been serving the City of Westbrook for 2 decades. I initially started my service on the school committee and then subsequently on the City Council for a number of years before I was elected mayor in 2019 and just recently reelected this past fall. Westbrook has really been on a growth trajectory for about 2 decades, a little bit more than 2 decades, really since like 1999, when those who are familiar with Maine and southern Maine and the greater Portland area, the Sappi Mill stopped its pulp mill process, and Westbrook what used to have a smell at times began to not have that smell anymore and began to see kind of a resurgence of growth and development in the community. And as part of that, Westbrook has really focused on investing in itself at the same time, so that others would like to invest in Westbrook. And so looking forward to sharing in more detail some of the investments in the past and more recently that we're doing and hope to also have in the future to help encourage much of the growth and development that's happened in the city.
Great. Thank you so much, Mayor Foley, and we'll talk more about some of those in a few minutes. I'd like to turn now to Mayor Jason Levesque from Auburn, and if you could just give us a few introductory remarks.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for having me. Just a little, I'll parrot kind of a little bit what Mike said, or Mayor Foley. I was first elected in 2017. I'm on my 3rd term. My background is not government. It's business. It's the military before that. So I am not an urban planner. I am a just rank and file layperson, if you would. So when we approached downtown development in Auburn, it was one of the very first things we went after. It was really all about what is wrong? What are the barriers for businesses, for private individuals to grow? And then really just aggressively going after any and all variables. So for example, we eliminated over 40% of all of our regulations and an associated 40% of all of our fees, to the point if you want to build a home or an ADU, it's a $25 building permit, period. And I've got some more, I could do a little presentation later and I'll go off your lead, but everything from eliminating parking minimums in the city, being one of the first cities in the state to legalize ADUs without any parameters, size, location, adopt form-based coding throughout our downtown. So what is old is new again, allowing some of those great neighborhoods that we have to actually be duplicated, replicated, and preserved and reinvested in. Just a short amount of time, in the first 6 months of some of these reforms with form-based coding, we've had over $750,000 in new investment. Regular people adding a bedroom, adding an in-law apartment or an ADU detached. So a lot of great things have been happening, and up to and including marketing and giving away property for free and supporting it with things that municipalities normally don't support, whether it be surveys, Alta surveys, free of charge, helping them overcome any type of brownfield mitigation, and just moving towards making Auburn the most business-friendly city we can. So hopefully that's a good roundabout intro for you.
Great, thanks so much. And next we'll turn to Galen Weibley of Presque Isle. And if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your what you guys have been working on in Presque Isle.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Markos, for the introduction and the opportunity to be here today and join the panel discussion. I represent the city of Presque Isle, a population of 8,800 in northern Maine. We are the service hub for the county. And we, going back, I'm not originally from the Aroostook County area. The council really wanted to transform our current planning department into an action results-oriented economic and community development department. And so that's what I was tasked to do. And I'm pleased with some of the direction that we are going as a potential example for other small towns and mid-sized cities in Maine to look at how we can streamline our permitting process to be business-friendly while also preserving the community's vision and quality of life standards. And so I'm more than happy to go into detail about what we've done as a community.
Great, thanks so much, Galen. We'll circle back. Just want to check in now with Kristina. I think maybe we have your slides ready to go. All right, so Kristina, maybe you can take a few minutes to walk us through or maybe jog us through your presentation, and we can chat a little bit after.
Sounds great. Yes. And I love doing this with visuals because really people don't generally understand what a whitewater park or river park is. And so this is going to be very important to the message here. So if you go to the next slide, please. So I was talking with the donor recently, and we have strategic direction in Skowhegan. We have lots of people who are excited about this movement, and we're working to raise some capital. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about all of that moving forward. Next slide. You can go to the next slide. I already talked about what our mission is. And here are a couple of photos, this one and the next, of our strategic plan community engagement that we did. And as you can see, Run a River is on the top there as one of the named initiatives for the future of Skowhegan. Next slide. And as I noted, citizens reaffirmed their support when they voted the strategic plan in as an official municipal plan in 2016. Next slide. And this is just a list of the strategies for economic transformation. And I highlighted the two that we're focused most on, outdoor recreation and local food. Next slide. And I want to just preface this by saying this is a big project. There's a lot of moving parts, but I've always been someone who is about diving in, going bigger, going home, and really taking risks. And so that's what my goal is here for our organization. So you can see now that, so on this slide, I've listed out a couple of things that we're doing. I'm going to talk mostly about the infrastructure, the River Park Plus, but we also have an outdoor program, and we run skills clinics, and we have free gear and equipment for our community members to borrow, which I could talk more about in the future if I have some extra time. Next slide. So the River Park vision is about making our riverfront more welcoming, building a riverfront promenade, improving access to our river from both riverbanks, enhancing our current whitewater to ensure that our river is useful for kayaking and actually river surfing as well. We will have the first surf wave in New England once this river park is constructed. We expect to be able to host a number of freestyle whitewater events in the river park. There's also going to be a natural channel for tubing on River Left, and then we're planning for an estimated 50 plus miles of trails, all accessible via our downtown. Next slide. And we have raised nearly $7 million in the last year. And so this is happening. We've got the permitting process is underway, and we are really stoked about Skowhegan's future as it relates to our river development. And you can see here where some of those things that I just mentioned are going to be located. North side access on the right, which is connecting to our commercial district, and then more access, including an ADA access ramp on River Left, on River Right, which is on the slide to the right side of the right side of your slide. So, next. This is a kayak wave, and if you go to the next slide, you'll actually see this in real life instead of just a rendering. This is a kayak wave in Buena Vista, Colorado. The town manager and I have traveled to several whitewater parks now and grabbed a lot of photos that we could bring back and share. Next slide. I mentioned our surf wave, and we will have the only adjustable surf wave in the northeastern US. Next slide, because there's an example of that we saw out in Sheridan, Colorado. And you can see the line date on the surf wave is quite long. And we saw this in Bend, Oregon, and in Boise, Idaho. Also, river surfing is very popular at West, and we're hoping to make it popular in Maine as well. Next slide. And we're planning for a third feature down a little further towards the mouth of the Big Eddy. If you're familiar with Skowhegan, it will not be quite as adjacent to downtown, but we'll eventually hopefully have 3 features. Next slide. I mentioned a tubing channel, and that's also kind of leaving our river. We're developing one half of the river and leaving the other half natural, so that way we can put tubers down through, and we'll provide a natural fish channel as well. Next slide. And this will be free and open to everyone, so you will be able to access the river park for free. Next slide. I mentioned the expanded trail network. We already have a river walk at the moment, but we are going to pull together an entire network. We've got a number of different trails that are not well connected at the moment, and I'll talk more about some of that process in a minute. Next slide. And this is a rendering of future riverfront development as well. Right now, our riverfront has chain link fences and dumpsters and parking lots. And right now, the plan is to change that. Next slide. I mentioned the ADA access ramp, which is not pictured, but that will be developed on the other side of the river across from downtown. Next slide. And stairs into the river from the downtown area as well. So access on both sides of the river. Next slide. And if you go to the next slide and just hit play, it should be on mute, and you don't need to hear me talking in the video. But this is actually a design charrette that we did in August with Principal Group, where we invited members of the community to come in and talk and tell us what they liked about different examples of riverfront development. And so we're looking at parking and developing a working waterfront along Skowhegan's downtown river gorge. So you can see we had a number of people come out and give us their opinions. And if you go to the next slide. I think if you hit the down arrow on your keyboard, you'll be able to go to the next slide, or the right arrow. Yep, there we go. Out of that process, 3 different concepts were developed with varying different features. And then we then put out a survey to the community this fall and gathered additional feedback. Next slide. You can see some additional renderings of really just generally adding green space to our riverfront to make it more welcoming for our community and for visitors. Next slide. And this is where we're currently at. I have re-engaged Principal Group. I was able to find some additional funding, and we're going to continue this process with them and finalize this design, get it approved through the municipality, and work towards permitting and construction to redevelop our riverfront. And you can see what some of that looks like here. Next slide. So project timelines. We are currently in environmental permitting. We submitted federal and state permits last year, and I'm expecting or anticipate those in hand this summer. We'll be working towards final design this summer and fall for the river park itself. And then construction, I'm hoping to put shovels in the ground this fall to at least build the access road. And then full-blown construction for the river park features in 2024. And ongoing fundraising for both projects, as you can see. Final design for riverfront development, we're going to work towards this summer, permitting this fall and winter, and then hopefully construction for riverfront development next summer as well. Next slide. We are currently fundraising and working to meet that gap of 1.7 million for the first phase of construction, which will include the viewing areas on River Right and access and the enhanced whitewater, specifically that surf wave that I was talking about earlier. And then I just threw in some numbers about where we've raised the funds. You can see that we've raised federal funds, nearly $7 million. We've received state funding through the Maine Outdoor Heritage Fund grant, and then a number of different pots of local funding sources, TIFs from the county and the town, Skowhegan Economic Development Corporation, and then we did have our first corporate donor came to the table last week, actually, or not last summer rather. So, and that was Franklin Savings Bank. Next slide. And of course, we have received private foundation funding as well. And we've got some additional things pending. And that includes a big $1 million foundation, or excuse me, Northern Border Regional Commission infrastructure grant. I've got $110,000 in grant requests for 5 private foundations that's pending. And then we're hoping that the town is going to agree to spend an additional $100K via the downtown TIF. Next slide. And next slide. Just some notes on economic investment. We reported nearly $40 million in anticipated investment to the EDA last year as part of our grant. 73 new jobs, and this is all from as reported by local business owners and developers. Next slide. And you can see some of the things that are currently underway. We have the spinning mill project that's on the island. That's about a $15 million redevelopment. We've got 24 Court, which is the Main Grains project where they're planning to expand across the parking lot. I believe that's close to 10 to 12 million currently, and a number of other things that are currently happening in Skowhegan. Next slide. And the Bangor Daily News reported $650 million in anticipated investment over the next couple of years in Skowhegan. If you can go back to that other slide, there we go. And here are some of the things that are part of that $650 million number, but really excited to see people taking notice, developers investing, and some of our local people who have actually purchased buildings and plan to redevelop them as Skowhegan continues to grow. Next slide. And I mentioned the trails. We're actually in the middle of a trail master planning process. And so we're working with a number of organizations in town who own land or have trails, and we'll have a final plan for that big trail network that we've been talking about this fall. And then the town has partnered with DOT to look at our village downtown area to make it safer for bikes and pedestrians. So as we welcome more people to our downtown, we're excited to be able to make it safer as well. So I can stop here if you want. I'm probably up against my time, but we do host additional programs related to outdoor recreation because we wanted to make sure that all of this was accessible to our community members. And I could talk about that at some point later if that was of interest, but the infrastructure development as it relates to our town and what we're doing, I just went through, so we're good.
Thank you so much, Kristina. That was really it's an impressive effort that the community of Skowhegan is undertaking, and we'll circle back and dig into some more of those things. I would like to turn to Mayor Foley now of Westbrook and ask him to speak a little bit about some of the downtown investments that they've been making, and also some of the programming that they've been doing to enliven their downtown and their Main Street.
I think my screen is shared. Let me just see if I can. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, it's looking good.
Awesome, perfect. So one of the things that we do in the city of Westbrook, we talk about we talk about investment in the community, and our economic development director, Dan Stevenson, he always has this quote where he says the private sector invests in communities that invest in themselves. And so Westbrook, as I indicated, has been working on this for a number of decades. And I'm going to show some of those examples. And a lot of like what we're seeing in Skowhegan that Kristina talked about, we're seeing very similar things. That investment that we're doing is kind of spurring investment from others because they see us putting in resources and work into those items. So for those who've been to Westbrook before, we have an existing Riverwalk in the city that we developed a number of years ago and was kind of expanded to the core of our downtown with a boardwalk style area that you can, and I think if you can see my mouse, it's kind of over on this area where the boardwalk style is. But this Riverwalk was a vision that was set forth a long time ago by the city. It connected a bunch of recreational opportunities, a softball field and a former outdoor pool and basketball courts, a baseball field, a park with a playground and a gazebo that hosts music events, another small ball field, and then the core of our downtown here and the crossing. And so it was enhanced quite a bit in the last 20 years, but some of these core features have been in existence for quite a while. And as you'll see me talk about, some of them are being reinvested. But that existing Riverwalk kind of looks like this today from the street level. It was enhanced quite a bit as part of a Maine DOT project for a new bridge that crossed the river. So we enhanced that with this area as well as a pedestrian bridge that is connected and some sculptures and things like that, that we hope to be able to expand as part of a vision that was created on the north side of our river, which is an opposite side, and I'll talk about more in just a minute. But you would be surprised to know that something like a river walk was a perfect tool for our community when we had one of these crazy things, like an ice disc. I know Mayor Levesque tried to make one in Auburn, but he wasn't able to. We've been blessed to have the ice disc in Westbrook a few times. Initially, when the first time we had it, and one hadn't been seen in Maine for a long time, it was something that generated a lot of what they call earned media. And so we're excited to be able to have benefited from that. And it's happened more, and it's not as exciting given that it's happened more recently. But one of the other investments that you can see in this photo is a parking garage that the city invested in over 20 years ago as part of the development of that newer office building next door that currently houses Maine Health Administrative offices. So that's another example of some public investment, but we never knew the Riverwalk was going to provide us a perfect viewing opportunity for the ice disc. So one of the other areas that we've invested in tremendously is our holiday light display. For those who have been to the area during the holiday season, for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been investing in growing our holiday light display. And a lot of the holiday light display, as it has grown, has been funded through our annual budget process, but we started to utilize TIF funds associated with it to create like economic development opportunities or like events. And one of the examples is the holiday tree that we added in our downtown, which is separate from our traditional holiday tree. And this is a LED light show that happens, and there's different images and stuff that spin along the tree, and music comes out of it. So that's one of the cool investments that we've been making to help promote various activity in the community. And businesses have seen a tremendous benefit from this, of people coming from all over. A lot of people go to the botanical gardens, or sometimes I think there's a light show at the Cumberland Fairgrounds, and a lot of those you have to pay to get into. These ones you can come and drive around Westbrook and you don't have to pay to get into it. And we have it scattered all over the community in the core of our downtown and Main Street. So it's really, really neat. So one of the things, another project we've been working on quite a bit is an outdoor 4-season rink that you can see here, as well as a boat launch. And these two amenities are located in the same place that was an older rink that was invested in by a community organization and kind of fell into a dilapidated condition. And this one was replaced to be able to support that. You can have a lot of different activities in addition to roller skating. You can play basketball on it. You can play t-ball, baseball, hockey, roller hockey, roller derby. There's all kinds of exciting things that happen on this rink. And we worked on this with CDBG grant funding, as well as some donors from local communities. And this project, it also works for ice skating, but unfortunately, we haven't had cold enough weather the last few years for a long enough period of time to allow ice to be able to be formed on that. But then also we had the boat launch project, which was, there was kind of a boat launch year that was almost impossible to access and difficult. One of the things that I'll talk about a little bit more in detail was we had a dam removed in the city of Westbrook as part of a surrender with the Sappy Mill. And so the river's levels lowered significantly. And so the timing was right to make this investment to make it more accessible. And this dock that's put in there allows you to launch a boat, a kayak, a small boat or kayak, and launch it very easily in a safe and efficient manner, and well as access the river in an easier way. So that is one cool project that we've been working on. Another one is the Westbrook Common project. One of the things that Westbrook both benefited from and suffered from was urban renewal in the 70s, where a lot of multi-story larger buildings were removed for pavement. And parking lots were created and smaller buildings were built, and so density was taken away. And this was a former city street that was paved over or poured concrete over with this old, structure here that you see our city planner taking a sledgehammer to, and now you have what we have here in this common area. This was a $2.7 million project that was funded with some grants, some American Rescue Plan Act money, as well as some donations and TIF funds to be able to revitalize this space and make it more pedestrian friendly and more friendly for activities and events. And this is something that we've been working on for quite a while. And it's literally like 99.9% complete. We're getting ready to hopefully cut the ribbon on it and have a celebration in the coming weeks. But this was an exciting investment that most of the work actually took place underground because, like I said, during urban renewal, they paved over old city streets, gas lines, water lines, sewer lines, electric lines, all critical to our downtown function. We're over 100 years old, and we needed to fix those and fix them right so that we didn't have to dig up anything like this in the near future. But one of the benefits of urban renewals, we did get underground power and internet. And if you see old photos of Westbrook, there was a lot of power lines and things like that going through the downtown. So we've benefited in that sense. Another project that we're working on is the Cornelia Warren Recreation Area, which I showed you in the visual, where there was a softball field and a baseball field together. We're working on some improvements to that project through grant funds, as well as local donations. It's improvements to the baseball and softball field, parking, and lighting, and a bunch of amenities that we're improving that area with, and we're hoping to maybe add a pickleball court to it. This area did also house an outdoor pool that unfortunately was built on not solid soil, and the soil was beginning to crumble underneath. So at first we sought replacing the pool with these grant funds or repairing the pool, and it was just not possible and not recommended by engineers to place another pool there. So the city got some good life out of that pool for about 40, 50 years, and we're working on trying to find a better place to replace it. Some of the other investments that we've had through partnerships, we have many partnerships with groups like Discover Downtown Westbrook, which is the Main Street organization similar to Skowhegan, and our Westbrook Gorham Community Chamber of Commerce, which is under the Greater Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce, as well as other organizations like Westbrook Arts and Culture, the Cornelia Warren Foundation, the Warren Memorial Foundation, all which helped to contribute to a lot of these different projects. And this was one sculpture project, as well as a mural that was commissioned by a bunch of people. So that's one of it. And it's right along kind of our river walk and connected into that. So that's an exciting amenity. So one of the other public investments we're making, if you've heard of it, we have a tremendous project happening in our downtown that is replacing a 80 space parking lot that was created as part of urban renewal. And we're replacing it with Vertical Harvest, which is a urban downtown farm or indoor farming that's going to be producing microgreens. They are currently located in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which has kind of been their research and development facility. And indoor greenhouses like this are all over the world and kind of have been refined, but Vertical Harvest has been working to refine this operation in the US. They hope for this project in Westbrook to be their flagship, where they kind of perfected the operation and they're able to kind of duplicate all over the country in the future. So once this project's complete, they have agreements to begin doing similar projects in other parts of the country. But as part of that project, we were able to set up a site plan for a 400 space parking garage, which allows us to do future redevelopment in the downtown on some of the surface parking lots that I kind of talked about that were created as part of urban renewal. To allow for density, hoping for residential growth, which will help to help support downtown businesses while also helping to address the housing shortage that we're experiencing. And you can see the picture of kind of its state in the last few months with the parking garage. This project does encompass a potential 60-unit residential project that kind of bookends the property on the opposite end of the Vertical Harvest greenhouse. This is the greenhouse here, and it would be on the other end. But unfortunately, given the challenges with construction costs and financing costs, we haven't quite been able to get that project off the ground associated with this. But the garage is slated to open in the fall, and Vertical Harvest is slated to be open in the first quarter of 2024. And they'll be producing, like I said, microgreens that they hope to distribute to local Hannafords through native Maine produce to area restaurants and universities and things of that nature. So that's an exciting, and this project is fully funded by tax increment financing through the properties that are actually within this TIF district, which is formed in and around the development, as well as the new lots that we talked about. and associated infrastructure TIF on a pump station, a natural gas pump station that was built in the city, as we worked hard to protect that value and shelter it from the various effects from state and city valuation. And so we've been working hard to utilize TIFs in an appropriate manner to do that. Some of the challenges with that project, like I've cited, increased costs due to the COVID pandemic and inflation, financing, things like that. Again, we were replacing really old infrastructure that was in the road so it could better support this project. That was over 100-year-old infrastructure. I swear before newspapers, they opened this road and was like, this is too hard to do, and they closed it. It's a 20-foot deep stormwater and sewer, which is not common for sewer, and it takes flow in all the way from neighboring communities to our sewer pump station. And so that was a real critical project. And as part of that, we encountered delays and reached various issues in surrounding ledge and things of that nature. So the street was closed a lot longer than we had hoped. And as part of all those challenges, we did some value engineering to the project associated with the vertical harvest and some of the road infrastructure improvements to make those things work. But we were able to get that across the line, and we're hopefully close to the finish line in the future. Another project here that we're working on in partnership with the Presumpscot Regional Land Trust, as well as the town of Wyndham, Sebago to the Sea Trail. There is the Sebago to the Sea Trail that kind of goes through Westbrook, but there's some areas that are very challenging to navigate along rail. They're not properly engineered and they're not properly designed. So we've partnered with all those partners on a grant opportunity for the design and engineering of this section of trail. It's the yellow section of trail kind of here, 3.5 mile section that requires walking on railroad tracks. So we're looking to try to engineer that to be off the railroad tracks. And so that's an exciting partnership that we're working on and public investment. The next is a new river walk. I mentioned a dam removal that we had in the community. It's right here where this island was. Sappy surrendered a dam and that was removed, affecting flows of our river. But as part of that, we were able to acquire from Sappy, who owned this island, as well as this red strip of land along the river that house their transmission lines, to be able to have an expanded Riverwalk North project, which has been previously designed as part of our original Riverwalk project that I talked about, but will flow hopefully around the river when we can get the design updated and funding for that project. Another vision that we have for the future is for a 4-season pavilion in our downtown. We have a lot that you can see here in this picture. We're currently actually using this lot for temporary parking associated with the construction of the parking garage. And that lot has a east-west sewer main that travels through it. And so it's really difficult to build on a major structure. And so this is an opportunity where about half the site could maybe house a pavilion like this that could have ice skating or different events. There's one similar on Main Street in Kennebunk, in downtown Kennebunk, if you've ever seen. And so that's kind of one of our visions for the future, to have in our downtown and be another public investment that we hope to consider. And so that's all I had for information, and looking forward to having some Q&A in the future, unless anyone had any specific questions now.
Mayor Foley, thanks so much. I think that's great. I'm going to ask that we turn to the other panelists, and then we'll circle back around with some discussion between everyone and some follow-up questions from the audience. Thank you so much. From Auburn, we have Mayor Jason Levesque, and who we've asked to speak to us about Auburn's efforts for downtown investments in increasing housing and commercial density.
Thank you very much. Hold on 1 second. Let me just cue this up. So what I'd like to talk about is, obviously, like you said, Markos, it's all about downtown density and building up, and a really infill, if you would. And it happened in multiple stages. And the first stage was in 2019, we convened a very large strategic planning initiative, about 120 residents. We got them together, very similar to what I'm sure every community has done at one point or the other, and had them rank their priorities. What do they want to see? In a very broad sense, they wanted more opportunities for recreation, business, education, a lot of probably what everybody wants. We have a lot of similar assets, by the way, as Westbrook and Skowhegan. We have a great river. And so we have a river walk. I thought we trademarked river walk. It looks like y'all owe us some royalties on that one. But it's a great asset and it's something that should be focused on. So that was stage one. What do people want? And then I kind of got into stage two. And that was really the staff level, policymaking level. How do we get there? How do we accomplish these goals? How do we have people living in our downtown, reinvigorating our downtown, and growing our downtown businesses? I will state Auburn has a challenge, and it's an asset as well, but it's geographically huge. We have a population of around 26,000 people, but we are larger than Portland, South Portland, Cape Elizabeth, and Westbrook combined. So we have a lot of space. We have a somewhat dense core and a very, very rural, large area of the city. And then you have the outlying towns. So whereas we're 26,000 people in Androscoggin County, there's 120,000 people. Auburn is really a service center along with Lewiston. We recognize that. But unfortunately, it was built to be that hub, that crossroads. It's extremely car friendly, pedestrian unfriendly. It was used, Auburn was there, okay, we're going through. There was no place to really park a car to go to and then walk to someplace else or even take transit. So there's some challenges. So what we decided to do is focus on excitement, growth, and execution. So we did that. This is the first step in this. It's called GoAuburn.Maine or ME, excuse me. And what we did is we decided to give away downtown properties and talk about our downtown revitalization. We wanted to showcase the fact that we do have a strategic plan. I'm not going to go through it, but just show you that it's here. And then highlight the key points that we thought that potential investors who are our target audience on this website would want to see. And then we backed it up with regulatory reforms, eliminating parking minimums throughout our entire city, legalizing ADUs, shrinking, eliminating actually road frontage minimums, shrinking setbacks, and really going and saying, hey, listen, we want your development. We want to see cranes in the sky. That was our approach initially. And what we did is we sprinkled different assets and we focused on the ones that aren't, if you would, brick and mortar assets. We knew we had great beer, we had a pretty good music scene, and we had a great river walk. We put that together and we've had a series of festivals, about 3 every year, focused on the river, from New Year's Eve Auburn to our Fall Blues and Brews Festival, to our, actually just recently, you might have heard of our Lobster Festival. All of that really is to show people that Auburn is closer than you think. It's kind of a tagline. We're closer to Portland than, a lot of Cumberland County communities, frankly. We're closer to the sea than a lot of other communities in the state. So we have a nice blend. So highlighting that, really working on our brand, working on the fact that we have opportunities, and then sprinkling events, sprinkling art strategically, small, but very important and focused investments in public space, gathering. And then I really think the big one here is getting rid of city-owned properties. We did a really deep dive audit into what we had. And like Westbrook, a beautiful parking garage was built around 20 years ago. And it was a third full, usually at any given time. And that was adjoining a huge 1.5 acre surface lot. We didn't need both. People were parking in the surface lot all the time. Even though it's shorter to park in the garage, it just we had to change the psychology, that approach that our residents had. So we put the lot for sale. It's been sold. There's going to be an announcement in the next month, massive development going on there, about 46 market rate apartments plus amenities and retail. Across the street, we literally had a hole along the river that used to be a factory, a cannery, burnt down 40 years ago. That's sold. We had a space along, actually kind of diagonal from there, that was sold as well. When I say sold, we gave them away for free. Why? Because we needed to kickstart the process. We need to get them back on the tax rolls, generating revenue, but also generating excitement and density. The biggest coup we had was probably the bane of anyone's existence, a church. Catholic Diocese 10 years ago gave us back beautiful, historic St. Louis Church. They're one of the hardest buildings to redevelop, to repurpose. We finally, after 83 showings, got this done. And now it's pending. It's going to be redeveloped into 40 market rate apartments and studios. But we also applied and developed some really unorthodox tools. For example, we commissioned an Alta survey for most of our city properties. We wanted to eliminate that barrier, if you would, for a developer. We took, when interest rates were low and they were giving money away with regards to bonding, we bonded $1 million for downtown incentives. We made sure we had that in the war chest so we could spend that targeted and really start generating and helping people overcome barriers that we actually didn't even know might exist. So we're trying to think ahead. And again, just streamlining our delegated duties and responsibilities, making sure our staff was there, that everything was transparent, but simultaneously dealing with our public that advocated for the end result, but not the methodology in which you need to accomplish the result, because we're about execution. That's been one of our biggest challenges. We have plenty of developers coming. We have plenty of people. We are on pace to generate 2,500 new housing units by 2025, but it's not without controversy. So it's been a great challenge. We are doing more and more, if you would, with focusing on space and building community and changing the mindset. And part of that mindset is folks' failure to understand or believe that they can succeed. And by telling them that you can do this, you are good enough to have nice things, we get Target, we get Olive Garden. It might not be exciting to everybody, but in Auburn, they're very exciting. We get new types of restaurants, new small businesses, more commercial agriculture. All those things can happen, and reminding folks of when we were the most prosperous and duplicating what made us get there, and then adding to it in a more modern setting. So that's it for my presentation, if you would. But in general, it works as long as you're fearless enough to execute. And I'm very, very thankful that the staff of the City Council in Auburn are amazingly fearless.
Thank you so much, Mayor Levesque. Very exciting stuff. Look forward to further discussion with you and the rest of our panelists after we hear from Mr. Galen Weibley. Galen, what are you guys doing up in Presque Isle?
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I'm kind of jealous. I should have came prepared for talking about downtown revitalization with all the other panelists because we have a lot of great stories coming our way for downtown revitalization. But I'll be the policy wonk in the room. So I originally, again, came from Pennsylvania. So when I moved up to northern Maine, I used the analogy when we transferred the planning department into an economic development department. I used the analogy of a barn raising because that's very similar to the Amish community up here. And I said, we need to build a solid foundation. And so part of that solid foundation is having a clear vision for what the community would like to see. But then how do we streamline the permitting process and operations that we're not hindering economic development and progress moving forward, but we're still preserving the quality of life. And so it was hitting the ground running with the planning staff. We, like many rural towns in Maine, we have a lot of paper applications. And so there's no online permitting options available. We haven't kept up with the technology. And so that was one of my first ask of the city staff is, okay, we're transferring, some of the services to being more online based, more user friendly, cutting down on the staff hours on just implementing permit applications after permit applications. And so we found a cost-effective measure because, again, we are municipalities. We have to be budget conscious to try to make online forms happen. And so I wanted to share with you all my screen for what it looks like for a user-friendly experience. We have a very basic form process. So we create different forms, different permits, but it has a lot of the same information that you see, and we keep it fairly streamlined with, what type of development is it? What are they looking to do? Having even the cost fees associated with it right there and accessible to the public made things a lot easier for the city. We recognized also that people like to submit applications after hours or when City Hall is closed. And so that added convenience really was a great selling point for our developers and our community, while we also respect our comp plan and our zoning ordinance as well. The beautiful part about this too is once they submit their application, they get a confirmation page and they can also schedule their inspection with the code officer. We only have one code officer for the city of Presque Isle. And there are so many times that it's just creatures of habit. It's always been the Wild West up here in Aroostook County, where you just walk in and hopefully you can get an appointment scheduled. Not anymore. I mean, you can call, the city hall, but you can also go online, click the link, and schedule your appointment based off the code officer's availability. And so we've kept it as friendly as possible because that's what we hear from developers. The developers don't mind going through regulations through the city. They want to see that the cities have a good quality of life, a vision for what they would like to see for the residents, because when new businesses do come to your community, they want to know that their workers are also going to have a great quality of life experience. And so that's part of the GrowSmart and planning that Presque Isle is doing, but we're also trying to, again, get them through the process. I also wanted to mention that we don't just do city permits of building permits, we also do all kinds of other application forms for the city departments. And what this has really helped the city is in communicating with other departments that sometimes we operate under silos. And so we're trying to connect everyone together to build that energy and move these projects forward and cut down the lag time. So that is a general overview of our online permitting process. We also streamlined our zoning ordinance. So a lot of towns, they just have Word documents or PDFs, and there are simple steps that they can take. And I'll pull that up for you. Another update they can do is just by creating live links in your zoning ordinances, you don't have to go buy expensive code software. As long as you have it available to them where they can click to the links and go back to the table of contents, it's made things a lot easier to navigate for developers that are trying to look for what your standards are for signs, what you're looking for site plan review. It makes it so much easier, and it's just a simple function in Word that you can add to make things easier. So I wanted to really highlight that for folks that are looking, on ways that they can streamline their operations to be more business friendly and keep the process moving forward for their projects. Another thing that the city of Presque Isle has worked on is we had a site plan review process, but we've never actually implemented it. And so we built it from the ground up of actually creating a site plan review process with other department heads, and also adding for the planning board. A lot of folks don't realize this, but our planning board only met once a month. And so if you did not submit your application for site plan review the week after the planning board meeting, you would have had to wait an additional 2 months to get in front of the planning board. And so what the city of Presque Isle did is I built trust, with our planning board, because that's the number one thing you have to do in economic development is build trust with your stakeholders, your council, your planning board members. And what we did is we said, look, this is the vision. This is what we're trying to do to bring new business to Presque Isle. And to my surprise, our volunteer planning board decided to have 2 meetings a month because they saw the vision for where we were headed and how developers would get an extra meeting in the month to help cut down on the site plan review process. So I'm proud to say that, we've implemented this now since the beginning of this year. We have had permit applications and site plan reviews. I have now exceeded for permit revenue for my entire annual year in just the first quarter alone. So we still have 3 more quarters to go. And we've also received positive feedback from our developers in Canada, Bangor area, other professional engineers throughout the state and down in Plymouth. They all are saying, you guys are doing the right thing. We're streamlining things, but yet we still have standards in place to protect the quality of life. So with that, I will gladly hand it over and answer any questions folks might have.
Galen, thanks so much. I do want to follow up with one question. With all these changes and initiatives and streamlining efforts, what results have you seen so far?
Definitely, I've seen a energy from the community that they see that there's a clear vision that the city of Presque Isle is business friendly, and we are trying to move the ball forward. We are also working on a village partnership initiative with Maine DOT for our downtown revitalization efforts. And so we're seeing people getting more engaged. I've also, past experiences, I look at the minutes from the planning board. We struggled to even keep planning board members, to even have a quorum. And so with having a clear vision and the energy that we're building, we now have 2 alternate seats that are filled. So we're at full capacity for our volunteer boards in Presque Isle. So I think that's really, the steps we're making to, and we're seeing, the results of the vision that we've implemented.
Thanks so much. I want to pose a question to all the panelists, and maybe we can just whip around the circle, coming back to Kristina, putting the initiatives that are going on in each of your municipalities in the context of smart growth. How do the initiatives that you've talked about and that you see happening, how do they promote or relate to smart growth in your communities? Kristina?
I think it's really important to utilize your assets. Don't try to become something you're not. I think that you can all see that in our communities, we've really doubled down on, investment in things that are of and true to each community. And so you saw it in our river investment in 3 of our communities. And I think that that's maybe one of the more important takeaways. Don't try to be something you're not. Look at your assets, do some sort of asset mapping, and ask your residents, because if you're not engaging your residents, then you're not going to have much success moving forward.
Thank you. Mayor Foley, how would you respond to that?
Definitely, I think Kristina kind of hit the nail on the head, but working hard to kind of protect the history of the community while also working to promote the future. What's kind of great about Westbrook and the trajectory that we've seen is, and I just recently presented to our historical society an update, which included some of the things I shared today, that they saw a lot of density and activity that happened in the downtown that was kind of negatively affected by urban renewal. And they see the vision for the future is going to help bring back that vibrancy to our downtown as a place. So they view it as returning to what history had. Obviously, it's newer buildings and more modern things, but they view it as important. So honoring, your history is also important and trying to promote the future.
Thank you. Mayor Levesque, what's your take on that?
I just like growth. Smart, I think all growth is smart as long as expectations are managed, right? And I echo what Kristina and Mayor Foley said. Really what we're doing is we're turning the clock back a little bit. Going back to historically what made Maine extremely vibrant, if you would, in its golden years of more recent memory, I'd say post-World War II to the early 1960s, pre-urban renewal, which was a kiss of death, especially here in Auburn. So, if you do it smartly and you execute, it's really hard to have growth that's detrimental to your community, as long as you have some sort of intelligence guiding the process.
Thank you. A follow-up question for you on that. You've got a lot going on in downtown. You mentioned ADUs, density, removing setbacks, really giving away city property. Could you put this in the larger policy context that Auburn has in a broader approach to development in downtown?
I believe in the power and the intelligence of the people that live in Auburn and in Maine. That's our policy directive. We don't micromanage. We don't overmanage. We don't tell people what they need to do. We listen to what they want to do and help make that work. I do believe that the people who live here and invest here are not going to want to destroy or devalue the asset in which they're helping to create. So let them go. Let their intelligence crowdsource what their experiences are from other parts of the country, the world, and bring it into our community. So be open, first default to faith and belief in the individual, and not necessarily faith and belief in urban planners or government. Okay, I think we should be listening more and doing less.
Okay, thank you very much. Galen, how would you put your work and maybe the goals of your streamlining efforts in the broader context of smart growth in the Presque Isle community?
Absolutely. I wanted to go a little bit back to what we value in smart growth principles. And I think in Maine, similar to my upbringing, we really do cherish the land. That's something we have a deep connection to the land, especially in Aroostook County with our vast open space and farmland. And so we are looking at ways that we can preserve it for future generations to enjoy and to also cultivate and grow new commodities on our land. So I definitely think that's a quality besides the historical preservation of our downtown urban centers is something that in smart growth planning that we also look to really preserve for the future generations.
Thank you. Another question I'll pose to the whole panel is getting your initiatives are happening in these larger contexts, and there's clearly a lot of connection between your efforts in revitalizing your downtowns or making processes more efficient within your cities. What would you say, is there a particular problem that you think you're trying to fix, or are there a number of problems that are creating opportunities that you're seizing upon? And I'll come back with you to start, Kristina.
I would say that we have a lot of people that are excited about momentum, but I think that one of the challenges is definitely there's a subset of the population in Skowhegan that truly doesn't believe in itself and believe in the community. And so we're starting to see that change. And as I mentioned, we've got a lot of great people behind this effort, but there's certainly, and I heard someone I'm actually at a conference right now, which is why I'm sitting in a hotel room. Someone at the keynote session earlier said that the elders in the community are sometimes hardest to convince. And I would say that, we're a mill town, and that's been our identity for so long, and convincing people that we are, there's truly value in this work has been a bit of a challenge. So that's one of the pieces. I would also say that a challenge that we're seeing also is housing. And that's just, across the board. So I don't need to go into that or belabor that point because everyone's feeling that.
Great. Yeah. Mayor Foley.
Yeah, thank you. So definitely, as part of what we're seeing, a lot of people are excited about all that's happening, to Kristina's point, and a lot of people are concerned about it. Sometimes people think too much is too fast. When you get affected negatively by construction or a street being closed for a while, people have no vision for the future and they can't see what's happening. And it's kind of ebbed and flowed in Westbrook, but NIMBYism is alive and well still in some of our communities. And, especially with the housing crisis, I've had residents recently tell me there's no shortage of housing units, or who's going to live in all those apartments that you're building? Because we're doing a lot of the same work that is happening in Auburn and happening in Presque Isle. And my mind is like blown, and I'm like, yeah, they were rented the instant they were available. And so there's still some of that's happening in the communities. And so those are some of the challenges that we find in trying to thread the needle and strike balance on all the things that are happening. And, in our efforts to redevelop in the downtown that's happening right now, we've put out an RFP for the downtown lots that are owned, similar to like they did in Auburn. And that's like a 3 to 5 year project before something even happens, to go through the selection process and go through planning board and all that. But people think they hear about it's going to happen tomorrow and it's going to be disruptive to their lives. And so I'm trying to properly let people know or try to explain their assumptions are incorrect, and that this stuff takes time, and these are just visions for the future, and we're trying to see the future be successful.
Thank you. Mayor Levesque, what challenges are you experiencing?
The same as everybody else. NIMBYism is alive and well, but I keep trying to figure out why. And it seems that people, and again, let's quantify this. Out of a city of 26,000, we have about the same 24 people show up to every meeting over the last year, 2 years. They are not representing the great masses, if you would, the majority of the city. But I do believe that people feel there's a finite amount of success in a city, and that if anybody else is successful, could build a house, has a place to live, can enjoy amenities, what have you, that somehow their slice of that success pie somehow diminishes. So that's what I'm seeing, and we're challenging some of that. And we continue to challenge that. But I think I keep reminding our council and our staff that, again, the folks that are the loudest are not representative of the majority of the individuals within our municipality. The vast majority of the people who live here want progress, want change, want nice things, boiling it right down to a simple element, if you would. And we also have a duty and obligation to represent the people who want to live here, people that need to live somewhere, that own land and can't build because they don't, they're 50 feet shy and a 250-foot road frontage requirement. So those individuals deserve to be represented, even though they can't vote right here. Again, same challenges, but try to understand what's driving this opposition. And again, Kristina, it's the old guard, if you would. They think they did it better. A lot of these folks that come out to every meeting, by the way, used to be the mayor or a city councilor or a planning board member. And it's hard to say, though I've gotten in trouble for saying it. Listen, we're in this mess because you screwed up. Now we're trying to fix it. Let us fix it. That didn't go over very well, but I said it anyways.
Yeah. Thank you. Galen, what are you experiencing as far as challenges up there?
It's a great question. I like to always frame municipalities are the workshops of innovation. So we have these types of conversations about where we'd like to see as a community, where, what kind of new ideas, what kind of new industries, what challenges that we're having. And sometimes those conversations are going to get messy, and they're going to be thought-provoking or different than what the status quo is. And so it's having those conversations and dealing with conflict resolutions really is what the challenge any community really faces. So my particular challenge, and as it relates to smart growth, is parking. That's always a fun conversation in our downtown area. And I'm looking forward to our June 8th public discussion on our downtown revitalization efforts as it relates to that matter.
Great, thank you. Got just a couple minutes left before we open up for some questions from our audience. But I would ask the panelists to maybe speak about some lessons learned through this process that other policymakers and officials could consider. And maybe if you had a quick question or comment, or I'll say comment for one of the other panelists, if you'd share that too. Kristina, you can go at it first.
Oh man, on the spot. Lessons learned. This is something I learned pretty early on from Shanna Cox, who is actually, probably many of you know her, down in the Lewiston Auburn area. She said, don't make plans for people in your community without asking them. And I think that is definitely a lesson learned, and something that, we probably, without her guidance and my early, tenure in this role, would have probably done. And so we are very cognizant of asking our community, and it doesn't always turn into what we want to hear. So, sometimes we hear things that we don't expect, but we engage the community every step of the way. And in fact, I've been the person in the Village Partnership Initiative work with DOT and the town, saying, hey, we got to get community feedback on this. We can't just assume that people are going to come out to, the 12 people come out to the select board meeting in the municipal, in the council room, and they're going to be representative of what the community wants. So it's really, really important to engage your community. And then I actually am curious how you got rid of parking minimums down there in Auburn. I'll
tell you real quick. I wrote the ordinance. Actually, I didn't. I redlined it. That's pretty cool. And then I said, hey, parking is ridiculous. And my council's like, It's ridiculous. We got way too much. Why are we mandating to Target how many parking spots they need? They've got professionals in their corporate marketing world that say, this is how many parking spots we need. And we just voted on it. It was the easiest, I don't know, we probably got lucky, the easiest ordinance to pass with the greatest positive to Auburn. So we're really excited about it.
That's awesome. Congrats. We've had several planning board meetings around the new development at the mill, the spinning mill, around parking minimums, and it was just like shaking my head frustration.
I also threatened to kill the Metro bus service too, unless I voted for it. So that might have helped. Leverage is important. Well, you don't need listen, what do you want? A parkable community, a walkable community, or a busable community? Pick two. That's all you get. Make them the best two you can.
Yeah. Thank you. Mayor Foley, lessons learned.
Yeah, one of the lessons learned for me is communication, and that's difficult in this day and age to communicate to the public and to solicit their feedback and get their participation. Kind of like the others have talked about, we almost have no attendance at any of our city council meetings unless someone's getting an award or there's this controversial issue. There's not a lot of attendance. So for instance, that vertical harvest project that we had tons of public meetings talking about it and finalizing TIF agreements and development agreements and all kinds of things, and nobody participated in it. And now that we're talking about redeveloping area lots that are associated with it, which were all included in that process. Hey, when we build this 400 space parking garage, we're now going to be able to build on these surface parking lots that we don't need anymore. People are like, I didn't know that was happening, and things of that nature. So I think in years past, having served across like a kind of a bunch of weird times in 20 years before Facebook even existed, a lot of people relied on the newspaper to get their information. And I used to tell, citizens who would call me, constituents with various concerns, well, why did they put that in the paper? And I was like, well, I can't make the paper print things. And the media outlets primarily want it in this day and age. They wanted headliners that people would buy the paper to read the story, but now they want headliners so they'll click and see all their ads. And so they still don't do a lot of positive news. And so, in the case of this new development, you might get an article about it, but along the process, there's not a lot. So I think one of the things, the lessons learned that we need to do is communicate better. I'd love to have a community newsletter. I know Maggie does one in Falmouth. That's great, but you need staff and resources to be able to do that. And that's hard to do in the nimble ways that we try to operate in our organizations.
Thanks so much. Mayor Levesque, lesson learned from you.
No matter how, best laid plans never survive first contact with the community. And always be adaptable, but never stop the process. Add to it, change course a bit, modify position, compromise, but always drive through, see the goal and make it happen. Our time in government or in staff positions is so short, and we have to really do what we can and deliver results in a very business-like fashion, if you would. That's my lesson. And never take yourself too seriously, unless you're the mayor of Westbrook, Maine, which leads into my question for the mayor of Westbrook, Maine. Do you believe in the concept that imitation is the highest form of flattery? Is this why Westbrook is emulating Auburn so much?
Well, Jason,
do you sleep well at night knowing this?
I failed to ask my question, which I don't have one, but to Jason's point, Jason and I have a healthy competition on a regular basis, and Maine is, Westbrook is, according to census data, Maine's fastest growing city. He likes to call himself Maine's fastest growing city, but the data speaks for itself.
I'm still sore about the ice disc. I am not going to lie. It's kind of clouded everything.
Thank you both. Galen, a lesson learned for us before we turn to to our audience.
Absolutely. I'd say, again, building that trust with your elected officials, your planning board members, and your community stakeholders is really key. And then it's also, letting go of control, once the public process has started. As a staffer, it can be frustrating at times, but you have to let the legislative process run its course. I wanted to ask a question of Kristina, if possible. Just wanted to, I was just curious, with your whitewater rafting vision, it was something I was actually looking into, exploring when I first got here in Presque Isle. And I was curious if you received any pushback for using a out of Maine example with your community.
So actually, our park is not going to be specific to rafting. It's actually going to be focused on luring kayakers and river surfers. We've got a half-mile run, and we're going to have 2 wave features. And we don't think that that's going to be an attractive location for rafting when we've got the Forks and the West Branch not too far away. So no, we haven't received any pushback because we're really focused on whitewater kayaking and river surfing, and we don't currently have that in the state at the moment in a downtown. We've got a lot of whitewater kayaking spots, but nothing in a downtown. So, and the closest river park currently is Franklin, New Hampshire.
Okay, thank you all. Our first question from our audience is from Lola Hayes, and just lots of compliments on the conversation and the ideas tossed around here. Her question is about resources for defining value propositions for investment. Beyond the qualitative, in what ways are you utilizing data analytics and GIS for feasibility of your projects? And I'll let whoever wants to take a first stab at that, or who it's pertinent to.
I'll just add real quick around GIS. Westbrook has had a robust GIS system for a long time and have received dozens and dozens of compliments over the years from real estate agents, developers, that they can do a lot of exploration about city lands and utilities and infrastructure without the need to bother staff and go in and look at tax cards and tax maps and all that type of stuff. So investing in a robust GIS system, which we invest on a regular basis, we have a budget line. We just reinvested in it with updated aerial photos. We're actually having a subscription, so it automatically gets updated every single year now, where sometimes we had a gap. It really helps to see things, and it helps us to see trajectory. Sometimes code enforcement can find things that are happening that shouldn't be happening on people's properties and things of that nature. So having a robust GIS system, I really feel like is critical. And when I explore things, and like I own a property in Raymond, that it's not as easy to get information in Raymond as it is in Westbrook about my property or about surrounding property. So that's a valuable asset.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak to that?
Sure. We've invested in a couple of studies. We did an economic feasibility study for the River Park back in 2015-16. That's been useful as we've applied for different grants, particularly from the Economic Development Administration grant that we applied for last year. We also did a market study around outdoor recreation and local food, our 2 brand pillars, if you will. So that's just kind of added to the fodder and the messaging around growing these 2 sectors in Skowhegan. And then we did a housing study also, which really, I think, opened a lot of people's eyes. And we've had some investments since that study, and developers have actually referenced the study. So that's been useful.
Great, thank you. Galen.
Yeah, I'd like to echo, Mayor Foley made a very good point. Having a robust GIS system it should be standard operating procedure for all communities in Maine. I have a housing developer from New Jersey, and he compliments Presque Isle for having a robust GIS system. It makes it easier for him in planning out his type of development of what he's looking to do. He knows what the zoning layers are. He has the wetland layers. He can see all of it, so he doesn't have to bother staff or pay an outside consultant to do this work for him.
Thank you. Mayor Levesque, data analytics and GIS?
It's key. That's key. We actually took our community room, which was an extremely large conference room, could sit 30 people, and we affectionately call it the war room, where we decorated it with huge blowouts of our strategic plan, properties for sale, focus maps of downtown, the screen, the dedicated computer. And it is about, you go on the kind of quote unquote war theme, the shock and awe. We bring a developer in there, we sit them down, and they are just, I would say overwhelmed, but surrounded by Auburn greatness. And then we use that data point. We use every functionality we can. And GIS is just unbelievable sales tool. And we actually, use some of the assets within GIS. If it's a new sub shop. We show them how we can geo-target a new audience for them. We show them how we can help with their marketing and identification of what the average income is in specific neighborhoods that might be going to their business. So we can get really granular, and that's definitely helped.
Okay, great, thanks. Our next question is from Margaret Williams, and she asks, how do you balance revitalization with controlling the costs of living and housing, especially when these investments can increase market value and make it difficult for longtime community members to afford to stay? Mayor Levesque, since I've got you on screen, do you want to speak to that first?
Yeah, that's really hit Auburn hard. Okay, we knew it was coming, and I blame the greater Portland area, tongue in cheek, their success or growth, and we knew this was coming. It's going to spill right over into Auburn. It's the next viable outlet. So we started seeing demand grow up, and that's when we really aggressively started do zoning reforms to allow more stock, because we knew the only way we can combat this is by increasing the supply to try to at least match the demand. We've done well, but it's a slow process. So just last year, we had to do a reassessment or readjustment, if you would, and raise home values up or assessed values up by about 10%. Here's the problem with that, though. All of our commercial and industrial space was really, it was assessed around 99% of true value. So we lowered the mill rate. We lowered the effective taxes that corporations and commercial properties paid, but residential went up significantly. That, I think we lessened that effect, but it's a real issue. And now we're caught in a little bit of a spiral. And some of this is leadership at the state level. You know, property taxes are regressive by nature, but now we need to have more success and add more value. And the only tool we have to shelter that is TIF. When we add more value, we get less rev share back from the state, less education funding. So it puts a greater burden, and we have to pay more in county tax. So we have a greater burden being put on the local property tax owners. So once you start down this path of growth, it's a lot of spin-off, potentially negative spin-off that needs to be thought about, mitigated, and work done with our state partners.
Thank you. Mayor Foley, I know that we spoke earlier too about some of the market pressures and as Mayor Levesque mentioned, you know, the vibrancy of the greater Portland area and how that was influencing and development that was happening in Westbrook. How do you balance the revitalization that's going on with being able to keep Westbrook as a home for people that have lived there for a long time?
Yeah, so one of the things that we found it critical, in addition to all of what Jason has said, is the same way we feel, and we're working hard. I blame Portland. I point at Portland as the cause of some of this, because we have people coming to Westbrook because it's a more affordable alternative to Portland, and it's created a high demand. And we have a simple high supply and demand issue. So supporting the development of all housing is important. But to your point about trying to keep people in the community who've been in the community a long time, we've worked really hard to develop senior affordable housing. In fact, in more recent years, we've led the state in the development of affordable housing, and we work with our partners in the region, Westbrook Housing, which is the HUD housing authority in this area, as well as Vesta Housing, to develop affordable housing projects. We have almost 200 units that are nearly approved of affordable senior housing that are in the development. We've developed about 200 that have came online in the last few years. So I find that as a tool that when people can relocate in the community in a more affordable manner, when they're downsizing and doing different things, that vacates units in the community that aren't as affordable, that new families can come in and they can rehab and generate new tax revenue and be there for families. So it creates the natural evolution of housing in the community. And so that's important. We're working really hard to try to develop affordable family housing or workforce housing, subsidized workforce housing. But again, it's in the challenges of construction costs and financing costs, getting that capital stack to a point that you can get that project off the ground. It's really hard, but we're working hard to try to do some of that with tax increment financing through affordable housing tests. There's some bills before the legislature now, which could help with affordable housing and public transit in the future, that if those are considered, might be helpful to some of our communities as well. So those are some of the ways that we try to balance it all.
Thank you. Kristina, you mentioned the housing report that you commissioned up in Skowhegan, and that was really kind of an eye-opener for folks. How do you see the projects that are going on in Skowhegan as balancing these factors?
So we have two major housing projects happening right now, one in downtown, as I mentioned, and it is going to be market rate housing. But frankly, I think it's actually the only market rate housing that I can think of in Skowhegan at the moment. And so we're pretty excited about that. However, totally recognize the need to balance this. And I just pulled, well, the other project is a Mary Street housing development that is underway thanks to KV Cap. And so we're pretty excited about that also. And actually, I used to live on Mary Street and walk to downtown, so it's not completely out of the question to make it accessible for people to actually to walk to our commercial district businesses. But I did just pull up the housing study, and there was something in there that has stuck with me. Mr. Jeff Levine suggests that we address expiring use properties. And so there are a number of properties in Skowhegan that have that used funding from federal financing programs. And so they were required to have below market rates for housing for a certain number of years, and several of those are getting ready to expire. And so his suggestion is that we actually address those ahead of time. And then rather than losing those below market rate units to the free market, he said that we should provide funding and other incentives to extend the terms of the affordability and improve the properties at the same time. So we haven't really had to think a lot about this in Skowhegan just yet, but I hope that we can get out ahead of it.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've got some strategies that you might implement there. Galen, what's your take on balancing revitalization with controlling the cost of living and staying in a community?
Absolutely. Sometimes I think it does come down to removing some of those barriers, as Mayor Levesque mentioned. One of those is residential density, especially in your downtown areas. Looking at removing those density requirements and the parking requirements is something certainly we're going to be exploring. We currently have approximately 52 units for housing units that are in the hopper right now for site plan review and approval. But we are looking for new ways. We're trying to innovate and figure out new ways that the city can be involved and partner with housing developers, whether it is financing through our Presque Isle Development Fund, reforming our TIF district as well to incentivize new housing development, and then also exploring the new tool by the legislature of the land bank to bring back into productive use our tax acquired properties through a private partner initiative to bring those back into the tax rolls.
Thank you so much. I'm just looking at the clock, and I think we're about ready to wrap it up. I really appreciate everybody's participation. There's so many great things going on in your community, and I would really love to have a webinar, a chance to discuss each community in their own webinar. There's so much going on, and I feel like we've only been able to scratch the surface. I'm going to turn, so thank you all very much. Mayor Foley, Mayor Levesque, Kristina Cannon, and Galen Weibley. I'm going to turn to my colleague, Maggie Fleming.
Yeah, thanks, Markos, and great job moderating. I don't really have much to add. Thank you again to everyone on their panel and everyone who attended today. I hope you came away with some good feedback and ideas to take to your communities. And we hope you will all join us for an upcoming webinar. And again, we recorded this today, so we'll be posting it to our website and our social media channels soon. Thanks again.
Thank you all, and have a great afternoon. And thank you to our audience.